Hey, how's it going, everybody? Mike Weber here, your Los Angeles real estate broker. Today, I want to talk a little bit about my predictions for 2023 for the real estate market. If you remember, at the beginning of this year, I did a real estate market predictions video that I put out, and that was pretty well received. I got a lot of viewings on that video. A lot of people seem to really like the information and my thoughts that I shared, and so I want to go ahead and keep with tradition and do that again for what I think is going to happen in 2023. And it was interesting going back and watching that video myself just a few minutes ago. It made me realize how much I was actually correct on. In fact, most of all my predictions for 2023 happened, and most of it happened pretty much exactly the way I thought it would happen, except one thing I didn't get quite right, and that was how quickly the Federal Reserve raised rates and how much they raised rates. I think initially their plan, their strategy, their rhetoric was that they were going to really shoot for an overnight federal funds rate of around 2%. As you obviously know, we're way above that. We're almost double that or slightly above double that now, which has transferred into even higher mortgage rates for the last 4, 5, 6 months. And that has definitely put a damper on the market. And so with those rates rising to that higher level, things have kind of unfolded a little bit more quickly and maybe a little bit more aggressively than I anticipated just around a year ago when I put that video out. But across the board, most of what I anticipated happened exactly the way I thought, and I'm excited to share with you guys what I think is going to happen in 2023. Before I do that, if you like my videos, give me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, of course, do that now. And most importantly, if I can help you guys with any real estate needs here in the Los Angeles area, definitely give me a shout on that as well. So 2023, first off, as we know, the Federal Reserve has come out a lot stronger than I think most people anticipated in terms of talking about continuing these interest rate rises. Just a couple of weeks ago, they raised rates again, another 50 basis points. So rates are definitely on the rise out in the marketplace, and it is definitely causing the real estate market to slow down. In fact, if you look back at around May of 2022 this year, and you compare till now, real estate prices actually have fallen rather substantially, around 20-25%, depending on what market you're in. They're hovering right around the same point they were a year ago around this same time of year. So that was a little bit unexpected because it happened more quickly than I thought, but I did anticipate as rates would rise, prices would of course come down, and that does make sense. Inventory, amazingly, has remained extremely low throughout this time, which I kind of expected as well. But it is starting to rise, and not much of what's going on the market is selling. So really, that prediction for a slow, kind of more difficult market is exactly what we've been experiencing. And in 2023, I think that's going to continue. I think the main thing that we're going to need to take a look at is really going to be, does the Federal Reserve change what they're saying and all of a sudden pivot and turn around and start lowering rates again, or do they kind of stay with the status quo, maybe flatten out any future rate increases and just keep things where they are, for 2023, and then of course for the foreseeable future beyond that, because that is really going to be what makes or breaks the real estate market. Now, I'll tell you where my head is at. I don't believe that realistically the Federal Reserve can allow interest rates to stay where they're at or continue to raise them for much longer at all. In fact, I think it's extremely likely that they're going to have to lower rates very quickly back down, closer to where they were a year, 2 years ago. And there's a very good reason why, and that is a large percentage of the federal budget right now is going to paying the interest expense on the national debt. And so, as you probably know, the national debt is continuing to spiral out of control, and we're having all kinds of inflation. Now, the Federal Reserve actually can't really do anything to fight inflation aside from pretend to fight inflation, because if they really allowed interest rates to rise and stay high enough in order to actually combat inflation, it would just completely destroy the economy, destroy the housing market, destroy the stock market. But more importantly, the government cannot afford to pay the interest on all of that national debt, because over the last 10 or 15 years, the maturities on that debt has been refinanced at shorter and shorter periods, like 1-year debt, 2-year debt, 5-year debt, etc. Now, I'm not sure what the average maturity is exactly, but I do know that the average has fallen substantially over time. And what that means is that as this debt comes due for renewal, where they have to turn around and refinance it, instead of paying those ultra low rates that we were in for such a long time, now they're going to be forced to refinance it at 4.5%, 5.5%, 6.5%, depending on the maturity they go with and where interest rates are ultimately going to be at that time, which would mean the portion of the budget that is going to be going to paying the interest on the national debt is going to explode. And we already have an exploding deficit in this country. In fact, the government continues to print money while they pretend to want to fight inflation. All the new bills that are getting signed are massive spending bills, and they're all going to have to be financed by more and more debt. So as we pretend as a nation to fight inflation, as the government, feigns this battle of fighting inflation and caring about the public, everything they're doing is leading to much more inflation in the long run. Now, when you take a look at the fact that in actuality, even though real estate prices have come down to some extent, the overall cost to purchase a home has absolutely skyrocketed. Not only do you have to pay a vastly higher interest rate, assuming you're financing to buy the same home, but also all the costs of owning that home continue to go up quickly. Insurance costs, maintenance costs, repairs, remodeling, all of the realities of actually owning a property are skyrocketing out of control along with inflation. And then of course, when you combine that with the much higher, twice as high, 2.5 times as high interest rate that you now have to pay to finance the same home, the cost to buy that same home is dramatically higher. And so for that reason, even though we're seeing some weakness in the housing market, it's actually going to cost people so much more to actually buy a home or investment property now, even though the price has come down to some extent. And I don't see that changing. I think the reality is no matter what happens, this country is going to have a ton of inflation. And yes, is there a chance that maybe prices come down in the short run and you have an opportunity to buy with the higher interest rates where maybe your overall payment is a little bit lower before we ultimately end up in just everything inflating and home prices going way up and all this kind of stuff? Yeah, there is some chance that you might be able to time it perfectly. But my instinct tells me is as soon as the Fed pivots, because they really have no choice and they're going to have to pivot, what is going to happen is as interest rates fall, real estate prices are going to keep going up, and we're just going to continue to see what we've been seeing for the last 10 years on until who knows when. In fact, there may never be a time where they're able to rein inflation in again, and home prices may never ever come anywhere close back down to where they are today. And I know that sounds crazy because you think, oh my gosh, they're already so expensive. How could they get more expensive? Well, that is what happens when a country, a nation suffers from inflation. If you look back 30, 40, 50 years in America, the cost of homes were a teeny tiny fraction of what they are today. And now look at where they've gone. I mean, in fact, in my area, I know a lot of people bought some of these homes when they were first built in the 1950s for numbers like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Those homes are all worth 1.5 million plus today. And the same thing is going to happen over the next 50 years, only it's probably going to be dramatically worse than it was back then. So predictions for 2023, things are going to continue to slow down. inventory should definitely build. As long as rates trend up in the short run, real estate prices will continue to fall, but not quickly enough to offset the additional financing costs and ballooning additional costs of owning a property, unfortunately. Then I'm anticipating a Federal Reserve pivot probably before the midpoint of the year to start lowering rates again, because realistically, the only way they're going to be able to pay the interest expense is just to print more money, which is just going to cause further inflation. So what's the point of raising rates if inflation has already won the battle and they know that, and they start to see pain in the economy, housing prices falling, stock market falling? They're going to pivot. They're going to start going back towards that 0 point or down from where they're at now. And all that's going to happen is prices are going to continue to rise on all assets, including the stock market, just like we've seen in other countries that had highly inflationary policies and a highly inflationary environment. So I think it is going to be important to not try to time the market, especially if you're talking about a primary residence for you and your family to live in. I think it's going to be important to ride the inflationary wave with as many assets as you can into the future. Maybe you get lucky sometime this year. There's kind of an optimal time to buy at a much more expensive overall cost than it would have been a year or two ago. But of course, at the lowest cost you're going to be able to get in the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years. So those are my thoughts. I'm curious what you guys think. So definitely let me know in the comments down below. Again, if I could help you guys with anything, reach out, let me know. Appreciate you guys watching. I'll have my market update video for the end of December once we have that data in just a couple days. Happy New Year's, everybody. I'll see you soon.